The appearance of this mage is, to put it mildly, extraordinary. Police officers, bystanders, hell, even terrorists soil themselves at the sight of this thing. This is the story of an unusual sorcerer with no heart, but a kind nature, who's being hunted by the entire Mages Association. Enjoy watching. A strange man, holding his hat in his hands, assured his interlocutor in a pleasant voice that he would no longer have to deal with problems related to hunger, war, resource depletion, and other misfortunes. His interlocutor was the head of the country, who was in a rather embarrassed state. At that moment, he watched as his subordinates and bodyguards were defeated by the man's strange power. And the fact that an energy barrier had formed around the government building, letting no one pass through it. Sometime later, this man addressed everyone with a speech that their organization had decided to stop being idle, as it had been for the last centuries. And on behalf of all the mages, he assured them that they had come to save all humanity, swearing it in the name of the supreme mage Jong Il-hyuk. Because at a time when the world was rolling toward destruction due to problems created by humanity, innocent lives were suffering, and the mages decided to show themselves, using the hidden forces of nature available to them, and taking human weapons under their control. They solved global problems as if by magic. Thus the world was saved, leading it into a golden age. The supreme mage Jong Il-hyuk became the greatest and most revered person in the world. But even so, there were still far too many matters in the world that required the use of magic. Jong Il-hyuk understood that he could not handle it alone. He needed a worthy and wise mage, ready to help, a successor who would become second after him. And as his heir and disciple, Jong Il-hyuk chose a boy named Eugene. He, in gratitude for being saved, gladly promised to devote all his strength to help. But 26 years later, new problems emerged. Magic was a power that not only helped, but could also cause harm, becoming yet another reason why innocent lives suffered. And the stronger the mage was, the more he could influence those around him. Becoming a monster in the dark, a mage could stalk, capture, and maim both ordinary people and other mages. A mage was able to instill fear and terror in the victim's heart. And such a creature became the only disciple of the supreme mage, Eugene. In a world where magic exists, Eugene's existence inspired horror. Those he pursued tried to fight back, using their magical abilities. Without hesitation, they used their strongest spells. But even so, all their actions could only delay the great mage's disciple for a while. In fear and panic, they tried to flee as far as possible from the terrifying mage, abandoning everything. But it was useless because Eugene always caught up with them. Without mercy or compassion, the mage traded away his abilities, which were more than just magic. In a dark room locked from the outside, a crowd of people huddled by the door. They listened closely, trying to understand what was happening outside. Suddenly, the door began to open, and the people locked inside rejoiced that someone had come to free them and that their nightmarish life as slaves would finally end. But all they saw through the cracked open door was an indescribably strange and terrifying face smiling at them. Sometime later, many ambulances and police cars pulled up to the building, and the workers hurried inside to help the injured. The people locked in the dark room were carried out on stretchers unconscious, foam at their mouths. 2 police officers watched all this with doom in their eyes, but without surprise. Looking at what was happening inside the building, one of them admitted that no matter how many times he saw it, he still could not get used to it. They both knew that only one mage was capable of something like this. And as soon as they thought about it, a voice sounded from the side, asking whether the victims of the one who had come had regained consciousness. With a bright smile on his face, the culprit of everything that had happened was walking toward them, sincerely worried about the kidnapped people. And although Detective Kim Sung-yi felt obvious discomfort at the mage's appearance, she smiled and assured the man that the injured were now completely safe. Eugene sighed with relief because when he opened the door, what he saw truly frightened him. People were writhing on the floor in convulsions, screaming in terror, so Eugene first called an ambulance, but feared it would be too late. He also explained that the detained mages had been kidnapping and locking up homeless people, forcing them to work with magical raw materials. As he did, he raised his hand, showing the police something abstract that vaguely resembled people glued together who begged to have the spell removed because they had realized their guilt. In a kind voice, Eugene assured the mages that after a night's sleep, they would return to normal, and for now, they should think once more about what they had done. After that, he turned them into a more compact little ball and placed it into the hands of a police officer. Eugene also reminded the officer that he was obliged to read them their rights. Kim Sung-gi bowed and thanked the mage for his help. In response, Eugene assured the girl that it was his duty because when one mage creates problems, it is the duty of the others to solve them. He also said that recently there had been rumors of a serial killer terrifying people. The rumors were so frightening that whenever possible, he decided to track the person down himself. They said his appearance was so horrifying that it left people speechless, and when he killed, he tortured bodies so badly that the victims could not be recognized. For this reason, Eugene asked her to pass along any information the police could obtain on this case. Hearing the man's words, Kim Sung-hee thought for a moment about whether she should tell him that the main hero of these rumors was he himself. The man said that it was already time for him to run, and then he took something out of his inner pocket. Handing the girl a sheet of paper, he asked her to help spread some information. After that, he waved and left. After reading the text, Detective Kim Sung-ye was greatly surprised. She could hardly believe that Eugene really intended to do what was written on the sheet. 30 years ago, wizards led by Jong Hyuk announced their arrival. And since then, magic has become indispensable in almost every field, from food to medicine, culture, and border defense. But there still were not enough mages. As a result, magic schools began opening everywhere, and many well-known experts in this field began competing with each other, advertising their schools. Eugene also decided to follow their example, but for some reason he did not realize how exactly his appearance affected those around him. Continuing to smile sincerely at people, he decided to achieve his goal no matter what, and all because he wanted to keep the promise he had given his teacher. With the help of mages, many things can be solved. For example, living conditions can be improved. However, there were those who used it for harm, not for a better world. Eugene tried to stop this as soon as he could, but it was only a temporary measure. Sitting in a park, he pondered how, as the disciple of the Supreme Mage, he could make a real contribution to the world. Do something that would help improve this world even more. Suddenly, he heard a pleasant female voice asking him to follow her. It turned out to be a kindergarten caretaker taking her pupils out for a walk. The teacher suggested that the children look around to see beautiful things. But suddenly she froze, noticing a strange person staring at them and instinctively covered the children with her body. At that moment, Eugene did not pay attention to her actions because an idea came to him on how to increase the number of wise mages with kind, righteous hearts by opening his own school. In order to recruit students, the mage decided to hand out advertising leaflets to people on the street. But something went wrong, and the people he approached ran from him in panic. The mage did not understand why this was happening. Passersby tried to go around him, afraid to even come close, while Eugene thought everyone was simply too busy to pay attention to him. Then he decided to use a little magic to make himself more noticeable. Suddenly, passersby heard a strange growl, and when they turned their attention to the source of the sound, they saw something on 4 limbs, growing in size. Eugene decided to lengthen his arms and legs, becoming larger so he could be seen from everywhere, and many long appendages also emerged from his body, each of them grabbing a leaflet. Then Eugene infused his flyers with magic and got ready to hand them out. All this time, the people watching what was happening froze in shock, unable to move even a finger. And when Eugene addressed them with his offer to teach them magic, they finally snapped out of it and bolted. But even despite such a reaction, Eugene kept holding the flyers right up to their faces. The image on the leaflet suddenly came to life and began reciting what was written, frightening passersby even more. Eugene was thrilled with his idea, convinced it met all the requirements of advertising marketing. He remembered that when he was little, his teacher took him to an amusement park where the boy saw a clown on stilts with unusual balloons. It still impressed him, and he decided to do something similar, but looking at the reactions around him, he could not understand why people were not happy along with him. Suddenly, he heard a shout that a serial killer psychopath had appeared, who killed both mages and ordinary people. The next moment, a fireball slammed into him. The impact was so strong that Eugene could not keep his footing and began to fall straight onto the person in front of him. So the man would not get hurt, Eugene tried to shove him aside. And at the moment the mage hit the ground, a pleasant voice sounded from the side, claiming he was here because it was too noisy in front of his academy. A pleasant-looking man declared that he had come to punish the infamous monster killer who frightened people and kept him from teaching future mages. Passersby shouted joyfully that Choi In-sok had arrived, a veteran mage and the director of the Academy of Supreme Mastery. Hearing the praise aimed at him, Choi In-sok happily thought it was a good time to advertise his establishment, and he immediately regretted that he had dealt with the problems too quickly, without using more epic magic for effect. But when the fire died down and the smoke dispersed, everyone could see that there was no one at the place of impact. The next instant, Eugene was standing in front of Choi In-sok and reproached him, saying that using magic in the city center was wrong. The academy director jumped back in surprise, because what stood before him had a swirl of smoke instead of a head, and the mage was sure he had killed the monster. Choi In-sok could not understand how it could have stayed alive because he had clearly seen that he hit it in the head. And when he wanted to cast his next spell, Eugene grabbed him by the face, covering his mouth with his palm. Eugene, still holding the man, said that he looked innocent enough to resemble a killer, so he doubted it was really true. The people around watched in horror as Eugene underwent a metamorphosis, restoring his head out of smoke. The mage went on to say that no one but a criminal would blow off a stranger's head, and that meant Choi In-sok had studied magic for dark deeds. Therefore, his suspicions were correct, and the criminal had to be punished and answer for his atrocities. The next instant, Eugene used his magic on the man. After doing that, he called Detective Kim Sung-ye and informed her of what had happened. Turning the upper half of Choi In-sok's body into some incomprehensible substance, Eugene decided to return to his original task. But looking around, he saw that the street was completely empty. Elsewhere, a girl and a guy were watching a recording of the incident posted online by one of the users. The two of them immediately understood who Eugene was, but still could not believe that the face they had seen was real. Not far from them stood another person in mage clothes, and the girl, taking the guy's phone, walked up to her and called her director. Around them, the area bore traces of a magical battle. Bodies of people dressed like killers lay everywhere, and a mage who had just finished the fight looked on at it all with complete indifference. The girl ran up to the mage, who turned out to be a young woman as well, holding out the phone and asking her to look at the video. One of the defeated enemies tried to attack her at that moment, but the mage disarmed the man without even looking. After that, she took the offered phone and looked at it. A terrifying face appeared on the screen, and the mage recognized Eugene without any trouble. The girl was surprised that the director actually knew the one who was in the video. The next instant, the mage's hand clenched, and the phone shattered into pieces under her grip. It shocked the young man badly because the phone belonged to him, and it also frightened the assistant badly, but the mage herself remained calm, thinking that even after many years, she would recognize that face anywhere without effort. The great mage had introduced her to Eugene back when she was still a very small child, and now, many years later, she had a chance to prove it to her teacher. To prove that among all his students, the best one had been her, his own daughter. And for that, she needed Eugene. At the same time, Eugene was restoring Choi In-sok's body, sincerely apologizing. When Detective Kim Sung-ye arrived, the academy director was able to confirm his identity and innocence. Eugene reproached Choi In-sok for attacking him with magic instead of calling out to him, and the man thought to himself that if Eugene looked normal, that was exactly what he would have done. To avoid a repeat of such a situation, Detective Kim Sung-ye asked Eugene to leave criminals to the police and focus on his magic school. He promised that he would, and after saying goodbye, he headed somewhere else to start handing out flyers again. The police officers sighed with relief because they truly worried about the mage, knowing he was actually a kind person despite how he looked. But his next phrase, that he was going to advertise his magic school near a public elementary school, filled them with horror. And the mage, lighthearted, headed for his destination, thinking about how good it would be to open his academy and recruit talented teachers and students. Ain first managed to use magic at a young age. It could not even be called magic, but the girl was very proud of her achievements and hurried to brag to her father. Of course, Jung Il-hyuk rejoiced with his daughter, but he also reminded her that if she wanted to be truly important, she had to use her power for good. He wanted her to become someone who would live up to the knowledge he gave her. Ain assured the man that since she was his daughter, that was exactly how it would be, and that she would definitely become the same supreme mage as he was. After that, the girl wanted to show her achievements to Eugene and asked her father where he was now. But the way the mage behaved after her question puzzled the little girl. Right now, Ain was dissatisfied. Sitting in the office of the Academy of Supreme Mastery, the girl listened to Choi In-sok's account of his meeting with Eugene. With a pained expression, he complained about Eugene's actions, telling how he had suffered from the mage's ability to turn people into mush, and voiced his distrust that this monster really was the Supreme Mage's disciple. Ain confirmed that it was indeed so, and then asked whether he really had not understood what kind of magic Eugene had used. Feeling awkward, Choi In-sok began to explain that he had been careless, so everything happened too quickly. But now he had prepared, gathering the academy's best graduates, and next time he would not lose. Hearing his words, Ain rose from her seat, noting that she had come for information, not to listen to a story about a defeat. It was clear that Choi In-sok was trying to enlist her support in the fight against Eugene, so she hurried to leave, not wanting to take part in it. Then Choi In-sok's subordinates tried to block her way out of the office, noting that her behavior had been somewhat rude. Standing in front of Ain as a crowd, they demanded that she apologize to the director and find a compromise. When Ain calmly tried to object, Choi In-sok called his people back so they would not be rude, assuring that they would handle it themselves. They, in a careless manner, replied that they did not have to be polite to her, because the Supreme Mage was not her, but her father, who had taught her magic, but certainly not manners. Sometime later, Ain opened the office doors. When the girl called out to Choi In-sok, he was sweating profusely. Leaving the ruined room, Ain noted that the words his staff had said earlier could be applied to them as well. A small cafe in the city center. The guests of the place nervously glanced at one visitor who made strange sounds and kept giggling. One of the customers was highly irritated by it and indignantly addressed the problem person, touching his shoulder. But when he turned around, his face turned out to be very strange and terrifying, frightening the outraged customer so much that he fell silent mid-sentence. The restless visitor was Eugene, and deciding that he had somehow caused inconvenience, he immediately apologized to the man. The man pretended that everything was fine and that he had simply been mistaken, and he hurried away with his girlfriend while Eugene went back to his laptop and gathering information. The mage recalled what Detective Kim Sung-yi had told him, that it was better not to hand out ads near schools, but to use internet resources for advertising instead. As Eugene collected information on the topic, he kept getting distracted by various videos, and one of them featured familiar people who seemed familiar to the mage. But the moment he focused on watching more carefully, someone tapped him on the shoulder again and called out to the mage. Startled, he jumped up from his seat and yelped, frightening the person who had approached him. Behind him stood Ain's assistant, Chu Yun-hai, who from surprise fell to the floor, and Ko Hui-myung, Ain's second assistant, hurried to help her up. When the girl recovered from the fall, she addressed the mage, asking whether he was Eugene, and received confirmation. After that, Chu Yun-hai explained that someone would like to meet with him and asked him to come with them, and Eugene agreed. When the three of them left the cafe, Ko Hui-um called someone on the phone and said that they were in the city center, so they would take a taxi and come over. Eugene was curious who exactly wanted to meet him and asked Chu Yun-hai to at least hint, but the girl refused, explaining that then the surprise would not work, thinking to herself that the mage made her far too nervous. Eugene did not insist and sank into serious thought about something. Ko Hui-myung was nervous as well, staying nearby in a state of readiness to activate his magic at any moment. For him, it was somewhat unexpected that escorting Eugene would be such an exhausting task. Earlier in their office, the pair of assistants and Ain had had a short conversation. She gave them information about Eugene, briefly telling them about his past, including his work at the Magical Technology Research Foundation, and also that 14 years ago he had vanished without a trace. Ko Hui-myung was greatly surprised when he got confirmation that Eugene truly had been the Supreme Mage's disciple, and Chu Yun-hai was surprised when she saw his childhood photo and could not understand how he had become what he was now. Not paying attention to their surprise, Ain took a pill out of a small box and continued explaining that while they played the role of Eugene's guards, she would properly prepare for the meeting. Then Ko Hui-myung asked what would happen when Ain met him. After a brief silence, the girl said that on the day Eugene disappeared, her father had said that Eugene had deeply disappointed him. It turned out that the disciple who had always been nearby and enjoyed her father's favor had turned away from him and simply vanished. And now that he had appeared after so many years, Ain wanted to know whether he had even the slightest intention of threatening the Supreme Mage or disgracing him. At the thought that it might be so, she squeezed the medicine and the pill burst into fine crumbs, making Chu Yun-hai flinch. Taking a new pill, Ain continued giving instructions, emphasizing that when they found him, they absolutely had to bring the mage to her. The pair found Eugene fairly quickly, but there were problems with getting his consent to go with them, yet Chu Yun-hai kept feeling that something was off about him. And she was also strongly irritated by the man's fixed stare, which made her blood run cold and stole her breath. Suddenly Eugene came up behind her, saying that something had become clear to him. Slipping a hand under his coat, he asked the girl whether they were working together with Ain. When he pulled out his phone and held it out toward Chu Yun-hai to show the video he had seen earlier, the girl spun around sharply and an icy blade flashed between them, cutting off Eugene's hand along with the phone. After casting the spell, Chu Yun-hai realized they would have to change tactics and ordered Ko Hui-myung to help her immobilize the mage. Ko Hui-myung, saying that he knew it would be like this, activated his magic and directed it at Eugene. The spell crashed down on the mage as a huge pillar of light, pinning the man to the ground. Eugene's body was driven into the pavement and lay motionless, making Ko Hui-myung mutter that now they definitely had a problem, because the director had asked them to bring Eugene to her unharmed, and they had ruined everything. After that, the man asked Chu Yun-hai what exactly had prompted her to cut off the mage's hand, and she indignantly explained that she got scared. At that moment, the severed hand twitched, tightly gripping the phone. It drew Chu Yun-hee's attention, and she watched in astonishment as it flew toward Eugene. As soon as the hand was back in place, it immediately reattached, and the mage apologized for frightening the girl, but then noted that no matter how shocked she was, venting fear like that was wrong. Earlier, Chu Yun-hai had asked Ain what they should do if Eugene attacked them, because there were rumors that he had killed many mages, and besides, he had studied under Jong Ehyok, meaning the assistants could not compete with him in strength. The girl replied that she should not worry, because although Eugene had once shown promise in magic, he had never risen beyond the rank of researcher. Ko Hui-myung was a first-class bodyguard who had repeatedly prevented assassination attempts on high-ranking officials. And Chu Yun-hai was a veteran mercenary who had crossed mage terrorist zones alone. They were strong enough to hold out until Ain arrived, and then she would take Eugene on herself. But when Ain rushed to the scene, what she saw shocked her. Right in the middle of a crowded street, Eugene, with an icicle stuck in his head, loomed over Chu Yun-hai, while Ko Hui-myung lay on her as a formless mass. Eugene turned toward the arriving Ain and wanted to greet her. But suddenly he was struck by a magical blow so powerful that it hurled him backward. Worried, the girl ran up to her assistants, asking how they were. Chu Yun-hai told Ain that no matter what spells they used on Eugene, he kept recovering, so she needed to be careful. Watching Eugene rise from the ground after Ain's magical strike, the girl listened as Chu Yun-hai explained that the moment the mage touched your body, you could consider yourself done for. The crowd around them began to grow louder when they recognized the girl as the Supreme Mage's daughter, which she did not like at all. Then Ain cast a magical spell on herself, her assistants, and Eugene. The girl explained that they needed to change the setting. After that, Eugene's body, like the others, rose into the air. And then at enormous speed, they shot up into the sky, stunning the watching crowd of passers-by. The speed was so great that in literally a minute they reached the outskirts of the city. After that, they landed in a deserted place. Making sure it really was Ain before him, Eugene was overjoyed. But even more, he was surprised by how much she had grown since their last meeting. 14 years had passed, and Ain was already 22, and Eugene feared she would not recognize him. He began happily recalling everything that had happened between them, but Ain cut him off by asking why he had done that to her people. Hesitating, Eugene explained that at first he had made a mistake that apparently really displeased the two of them, and because of that they started throwing deadly spells at him. And since they could have hit passers-by, he restrained the pair. But for some reason, Ain was listening, yet not hearing his explanation. The girl admitted that, in truth, she was not interested in the reasons for what had happened. She had only needed a pretext to challenge Eugene to a duel. Hearing her words, Chu Eun-hai and Ko Hui-myung were struck speechless, because Ain had essentially been using them as cover. Eugene was bewildered as well, especially when the girl also accused the mage of hiding behind the name of the Supreme Mage's disciple, causing many problems. Ain threatened to grind him into dust and activated a multi-layer spell that combined several elements at once. Ain burned with the desire to prove that it was she, not Eugene, who should stand beside her father. Using the power of her staff, Ain directed the created spell at the mage. She also cast acceleration on herself and rushed forward. Leaping into the air and swinging her staff, Ain furiously demanded that Eugene not speak to her as if they were close. In the office building of the Academy of Supreme Mastery, a conversation was going on between Choi In-sok and his subordinates. The battered men were furious at how she had insulted both the director and the entire academy with her actions. They demanded that she be put in her place, even though she was the Supreme Mage's daughter. Unlike them, Choi In-sok did not want to get involved with the girl because he knew perfectly well that she had inherited not only money, but also the talent of the greatest wizard in the world. He himself had once taken part in a mission to crush a gang of mages together with Ain on the same team. That was when he first felt like a helpless little bug, seeing what spells she was capable of using. Even back then, he clearly realized the gap between them, so enormous that it was hard to believe they were both mages. Choi In-sok preferred to keep silent and not argue with her. He understood perfectly well that all the Academy's combat mages, including himself, would not be enough even to miraculously touch a single hair on her head. Ko Hui-myung and Chu Eun-hae, bound by Eugene's magic, could only quietly watch from the side as the battle between him and Ain unfolded. The girl's magic was essentially like a natural disaster, and the thought of her losing never even occurred to anyone. Eugene, taking yet another blast of magic, thought that the girl was acting somewhat strangely. She was far too aggressive, as if she were angry at him, but the man could not understand why. Unable to reach any conclusion, the mage decided to ask Ain directly what had happened to her. Because the little girl he knew was not the type to throw a tantrum just because she was in a bad mood. Hearing his words, Ain grew even angrier and called Eugene a traitor. Because he had abandoned both her and her father, disappeared without saying a word, and then came back to the city and dragged the title of the Archmage's disciple through the mud. So, angry at the man, Ain was venting her emotions on him with her spells. Hearing her words, Eugene was surprised by what she meant by betrayal, because he did not understand what he could have done to upset the girl like that. When another of Ain's spells smeared Eugene's body across the ground, the mage remembered something. A long time ago, when he had only just met her, they had one conversation. For some reason, Ain could not start casting at all, while other children had already begun learning basic magic. She was terribly afraid that if she could not master the basics, her dad would abandon her. Eugene assured the girl that the Supreme Mage loved her more than anyone in the world, so she should not worry. He assured her that together with the Supreme Mage, they would definitely come up with something and raise her into a wizard no worse than her father. Eugene also promised that as soon as Ain could use mana, they would start studying it together, and he would train her so well that even her dad would be amazed. Hearing his words, little Ain wiped away her tears and, in agreement, sealing the promise with their pinkies, the girl was finally able to calm down. Now, remembering that story, Eugene thought the girl was angry at him because of a broken promise. Ain, in turn, thought that Eugene was a real monster because she attacked him with every spell she knew and not a single one worked. No matter how much she attacked him, Eugene's body recovered again, which made the girl even angrier. Looking at her reaction, Eugene grew more and more convinced that it was all because he had failed to keep his promise to her. For a while, Ain stopped attacking Eugene with magic. The girl realized that in the heat of emotion, she had spent far too much magic, yet still could not overcome the man's regeneration. In her eyes, Eugene looked relaxed, not responding to her actions and hardly spending any mana at all. Her heart was pounding wildly in her chest, and the girl decided to take her medicine to slow her heartbeat. At that moment, Eugene called out to her and said that he realized he had been so happy to see her that he had completely forgotten the promise he had made to her. He was sure that all she was doing now was showing what she had worked so hard on while he was gone. Hearing his words, Ain was very surprised because that thought had never even crossed her mind. Eugene went on to say that Ain had now become a professional mage and had achieved it all on her own, and that the variety of spells in her arsenal had even made him shudder. He assured the girl that he understood how hard she must have worked without rest, and that the Supreme Mage was probably very proud of her. Those words reminded Ain of how she would come into her father's office to show her results. Jong In-hyuk always rejoiced at the progress she made and always praised how incredible she was. Of course, the little girl was happy to hear such praise and assured her father that she was going to surpass all his students, so he would have to teach her a lot more. But her father's next words dulled her joy because he said that he believed the day would come when she would be as much a pride to him as Eugene was. The fact that her father said something like that forced her to study even harder. Sparing neither strength nor time, Ain poured in an enormous amount of effort, impressing her instructors. She fought to the brink of death and piled up her achievements for one goal. She wanted her father not just to praise her, but at least once to call her the best. Even after Eugene vanished somewhere, Ain believed he still remained her father's favorite as the successful student. Eugene remembered his teacher's words that you must notice your students' efforts, so he decided Ain needed praise. He believed that if he could master this method of psychological support for students, he could become a wonderful head of his academy. But for some reason, all his actions only angered the girl even more, to the point that she crushed the medicine box in her hands. Seeing that, Eugene again found himself bewildered. Ain tossed the remaining intact pills into her mouth and swallowed them. Watching this, Ko Hui-myung and Chu Eun-hae were horrified because they understood that the girl was not just angry, she was enraged. Ain took Eugene's actions and words as him devaluing everything she had achieved, her entire struggle, with a single sentence. It seemed to her that the mage had quickly made her look like a boastful child. So she decided to show Eugene the strongest magic she was capable of. When the mage saw the scale and power of that spell, he was utterly astonished, and Ain suggested that he check whether his regeneration could withstand a blow of such force. Seeing what she was doing, her assistants broke into hysterics, begging her to stop because this magic could kill all of them. Eugene was deeply impressed by the result of the girl's sorcery. He was wildly delighted that little Ain was already capable of casting a triple spell. To achieve that, you needed not only skill, but titanic effort. The magic condensed into a large glowing sphere that spread unimaginable pressure around it. Feeling it pressing down on him, Eugene understood that he wanted to make sure the girl's effort did not go to waste and would bear even more fruit. Ain was already ready to release the spell toward Eugene, but then something strange happened. Eugene decided that the girl did not need praise, but someone who would point out her mistakes, and the next instant he reached his hand toward her. Then his hand wrapped around the girl's arm, holding the activated spell, as if her arm were passing right through his. Then he pulled the girl closer and began explaining that she needed to adjust her mana distribution a little for a more effective result. Watching Eugene suddenly start teaching Ain, Chu Yun-hai sighed with relief, unsure whether to be glad they had survived or to expect even bigger trouble in the future. Listening to Eugene scold her, Ain grew even angrier. Yanking her arm out of his grip, the girl began shouting at the mage that it was his old habit, one he still had not gotten rid of. In confusion, Eugene asked why he should do that, and the girl burst into even louder cursing. Her face turned red with rage as she yelled that Eugene was ready to nitpick any little thing, even when they were fighting. She even brought up the time she baked cookies for her father's birthday, and Eugene had brazenly eaten one and started commenting like a food critic, not caring at all how ashamed she had felt in front of her father. Not holding back her emotions, the girl vented about how much it annoyed her when Eugene stuck his nose into things that were none of his business and handed out unwanted advice, calling him a nerd mage. Having said everything that was on her mind, the girl finally managed to catch her breath. More than anything in this situation, Eugene was surprised that Ain had called him a nerd mage. Then he snapped too, remembering that he had put a spell on Ain's two subordinates and hurried to remove it from them. While Eugene dealt with the aftermath of the magic, Ain fanned her reddened face in embarrassment, thinking that yelling at the mage had made her look crazy. As he unraveled his spell, Eugene asked the girl when she had first been able to use magic because he and her dad had been very worried. Hearing his question, Ain paused for a moment, her memories. Then she replied that it was the next day after Eugene left. Hearing her words, the mage froze in place. Ko Hui-myung was very glad that his body and face had returned to normal, and Ain, seeing that they were fine, told her assistants that it was time for them to leave. Then she addressed Eugene again, saying that whatever he had been doing during his absence, he needed to know one thing. A large number of mages had opened a hunt for him, but the girl was sure he would definitely handle it. Eugene could not help scratching the scar on his neck when he heard Ain's request to be more careful and not drag her father's reputation even further down. In the end, the girl added that the Supreme Mage was no longer waiting for him, that neither he nor she needed Eugene. When Chu Yun-hai saw that Ain was not going to activate a transfer spell, she asked the girl if she was going to leave him here. Ain remembered that she had moved all of them far from the city center and called Eugene over, deciding to take him back. When the man walked up to them, the girl asked where he lived so she could take him home. She also handed him her business card just in case something happened. When Eugene reached out his hand toward it, Ain asked the mage not to run to her father first, but to come to her. The next moment, Eugene's hand pierced the girl's body. Ain did not immediately realize what was happening, and she was greatly surprised. Her assistants were also deeply shocked by the mage's actions. The next instant, Eugene ripped something out of the girl's chest. Earlier, when the man heard Ain's words about when exactly she had started using magic, Eugene began to suspect something. Eugene sincerely did not want his thoughts to be true, because he genuinely tried to understand what his teacher had done. 14 years ago, his body had been torn into many pieces, and the one who did it was none other than his teacher, Jong Il-hyuk. But even cut apart by magic into fragments, Eugene could not fully understand why his teacher had done it, why he had taken the mage's heart from him. And now, holding it in his hands, Eugene still did not understand how Jong Il-hyuk could take his heart and give it to Ain. When Eugene was still little, he witnessed a conversation between his teacher and another mage named Friedrich, who was his right-hand man. That mage was shouting so loudly that Jong Il-hyuk asked him to keep his voice down. But the man only shouted even louder, outraged that the Supreme Mage had decided to start teaching magic to ordinary people. In his opinion, people were not even capable of handling the knowledge they already had, burying themselves under ruin like complete idiots. When Jong Il-hyuk proposed revealing the existence of magic to the world, Friedrich supported him because he believed mages should lead humanity, but now he did not agree that Jong Il-hyuk was also going to share knowledge of it. The Supreme Mage only let out a heavy sigh, reminding the man that mages are people too. Friedrich did not know what to say to that, and only fumed in silence. Jong Il-hyuk tried to explain that while mages hid, magic itself remained in a state of stagnation, and making it public was not salvation, it was only a path to existence. Friedrich did not agree with that, and as he listened to the Supreme Mage's words, he activated one of his spells. Jong Il-hyuk, sensing the disturbance in space and the heat, glanced over his shoulder. Friedrich's spell cut through not only the wall, but also destroyed everything in front of the building they were in. Looking at the Supreme Mage, Friedrich objected that it was not magic that dealt with existence, but those useless people. Then Jong Il-hyuk remarked that if Friedrich did not believe in people, then he could simply watch in silence what would happen in the world. Little Eugene trembled with fear while his teacher tried to get through to his assistant that one day one of those fools might become such a terrifying mage that even Friedrich, the strongest of the living, would look like a weakling. Then he activated his mana, noting that his first assistant had made yet another mistake. Seeing his actions, Friedrich grew very wary because he knew Jong Il-hyuk did not activate magic for no reason. Magic lit up in 3 multicolored circles, and the Supreme Mage's next words accused the first assistant of daring to oppose the Supreme Mage as a mere mage, and that had always been punishable. Ain was slowly regaining consciousness. When her eyes cracked open, she heard voices and fragments of a conversation that was clearly about her. Remembering the last moments before she lost consciousness, the girl jolted upright and Chu Yun-hai asked if she had come to. Ain asked her assistants where they were, and at the same time, Eugene asked the girl if she was alright. That was somewhat unexpected, and Ain recoiled backward, while Chu Yun-hai explained that they were in Eugene's magic school and he was the director here. Ain asked distrustfully whether she had understood correctly. Eugene happily replied that it was indeed so. His school still needed repairs and students, but that was exactly why Eugene was so busy right now. The mage kept talking about his plans, but Ain was not really listening, checking whether everything was alright with her body because a heart had been pulled from her chest and put back in. Then she asked her assistants why they were sitting there calmly chatting with the man who had ripped out her heart. Then Ko Hui-myung explained that Eugene knew about the condition of Ain's heart. The mage froze at those words because he did not know how to explain all of this to the girl. Ain was very surprised by what she heard, but instead of the question Eugene expected, she clarified whether he had pierced her ribcage clean through just to check that. Ko Hui-myung explained that Ain had been throwing around complex techniques all day, so she had been taking a lot of medicine in full view of the mage. Remembering that, the girl paused to think for a moment. Eugene sat motionless while the assistants went on to say that when Ain lost consciousness, the mage panicked and grabbing everyone rushed here. Ain knew that a leak of information about her health could not be allowed, so she apologized to Eugene for the trouble she had caused. The assistants also rose from their seats to follow the girl. Already at the exit, Eugene called out to Ain. Without looking her in the face, the mage said that he needed to tell her something, and finally meeting her eyes, he clarified that it was something important. Ko Hui-myung doubted whether it was worth leaving the girl alone with Eugene, but she told them to go ahead. Walking along the city street, Chu Yun-hai discussed what had happened with her partner. She wondered how Ain had managed to live next to someone like Eugene and not go insane. Then she noticed some kind of sheet in Ko Hui-myung's hands and asked what it was. He explained that it was a promotional flyer for Eugene's Magic Academy, and the girl was surprised how, with a face like that, he planned to teach children. But Ko Hui-myung disagreed, explaining that his skills, judging by the duel with Ain, were incredible, so he could teach a lot, to which the girl remarked that no mage would teach all his secrets to others just because he got paid. Ko Hui-myung guessed that the mage wanted to ask Ain to help with advertising, and Chu Yun-hai sarcastically noted that even the Archmage's daughter would not be able to pull that off. At that moment, Ko Hui-myung accidentally bumped a passerby with his elbow. He apologized to the man, and Chu Yun-hai noted that he needed to be more careful. Suddenly, the passerby asked the two assistants to stop, wondering whether they happened to work with Jong Il-hyuk. His question put Ko Hui-myung on guard, but Chu Yun-hai carelessly confirmed that they did, and then asked how he knew. The passerby replied that he had seen a video with them on VTube. Then he explained that he was a close friend of Ain's father, which meant he could be considered her uncle. At the same time, Ain herself, sitting opposite Eugene, asked what it was he wanted to talk to her about. In a serious tone, Eugene asked whether he had understood correctly that using magic put a heavy strain on her heart. Upset, Ain asked in return whether her father had told him about it. After a short pause, the girl went on to say that if she continued using magic that way, she would most likely die. Eugene sank into heavy silence after hearing that. Leaning her head back against the sofa, Ain muttered that it was ironic for her because she had inherited not only a special talent from her father, but also his condition. Jong In-hyuk called the illness mana allergy, a disease that creates and builds up strain in the heart to such an extent that one day it will explode and kill the carrier. After hearing the girl's story, Eugene gave an ironic chuckle, repeating the name of the illness in his mind because he found his teacher's words rather convincing. Seeing the strange expression on the mage's face, Ain smiled and added that Eugene was as predictable as always, since out of curiosity he had pulled out her heart. Thinking that was all the mage wanted to know, Ain got ready to leave because she still had many things to do. But when she put on her hat and was about to stand up, Eugene grabbed her by the hand. The man began saying that there were many things in this world that people needed besides wizards, which puzzled the girl. But her face changed sharply when he went on to say that instead of counting down the days to her death, she should find another job where her talents would definitely be useful. Eugene wanted to help her with that, but the girl did not appreciate his concern and only grew angry. Yanking her hand out of his, she firmly declared that Eugene had crossed the line. Her words, that she no longer considered him her uncle, and that he had no right to interfere in her life, even if it was going downhill, made Eugene turn pale and break out in sweat. Ain firmly stated that she had received a special gift from her father, and being born with such an illness was only her burden, and besides, being anyone other than a wizard was simply unthinkable for her. That she would rather die than be a worthless daughter of the Supreme Mage. Then she grabbed one of the flyers on the table and said that opening a magic school suited him perfectly. And since he loved lecturing, let him do it with those who paid money and not crawl at her with his attention. Eugene understood that the girl could not be dissuaded so easily, so he decided to tell her the truth about the heart. But the moment he began, Ain's phone rang and cut him off. It was Chu Yun-hai calling, and she was completely terrified. After her next words, Ain's face changed, and she assured her assistant that she was heading to her right away. Then she quickly turned around and headed for the exit, apologizing to Eugene that she urgently had to run. Eugene was left alone in the room and, dropping his shoulders, wondered whether he should have told the girl everything. Many years ago, he and the Supreme Mage had conducted research into a mage's heart, but the results were not good. They tried to find out whether a mage's heart could be transplanted into an ordinary person, but all the simulations ended in failure because rejection occurred. Eugene muttered gloomily that if they had solved that problem, they could have created many good mages. But Jong In-hyuk noted that there was an error in his calculations. The words that it was all because the mage intended to implant the strongest magical heart into Ain's body when she was not even 8 years old made Eugene think. Smiling, he replied that Ain was his dear niece, so he was ready to give her the best he had, but if she gained the ability to cast spells and her life was shortened because of it, then there would be no point. For that reason, he suggested postponing this method for now and searching for another path. Remembering that research now, Eugene thought that even if Ain learned the truth, she would still hardly refuse to be a mage. He was at a loss, not knowing what to do next and how to make her stop resorting to magic. Sitting down on the sofa, he thought about it for a long time, but nothing came to mind. Just like 14 years ago, Eugene was powerless in this matter. His thoughts were interrupted by a call. A little later, another scene was unfolding far from the city. Ain stood very angry before a man who said that she did not really resemble her father, except for the color of her hair and eyes. But her hat brought back memories for him. Ain frowned, not really listening to what the man was saying because she was focused on the colossal pressure coming from him. Before her stood Friedrich Gamora, her father's former first assistant and an enemy who had razed more than one city fighting him. Taking a sip from a can of beer, the man irritably remarked that even the mere sight of that hat dragged him back into the past and made him sick. Ko Hui-myung and Chu Eun-hai were hanging in the air behind the man, pierced by pillar-like spells. The man tossed the assistants at Ain's feet. When they hit the ground, he asked with contempt why she kept such weaklings around her. Ko Hui-myung begged Ain to run as fast as she could, because only her father could deal with this mage, and Chu Yun-hai apologized for calling the girl. A magic circle appeared beneath the assistants, and Aang explained that she was sending them to the hospital, thanking them for everything. The next instant, the pair shot upward at very high speed and flew away. Seeing that the girl remained, Friedrich smirked and asked her to help him a little. Activating his mana, the man said that he had not crossed paths with her father for many years, and you do not visit empty-handed. Aang immediately understood what her father's former assistant was hinting at, and an evil smile spread across her face on its own. Friedrich declared that bringing her head as a gift would make their first meeting in 30 years a bit more dramatic. Aang sarcastically noted that even with such a gift, her father was unlikely to forget all the grudges and accept him as a friend. Activating a spell, the girl assured the mage that she would do everything to prevent them from meeting. At the city's central hospital, chaos was unfolding. Right in front of the building, 2 injured people suddenly appeared on the ground, and the hospital staff rushed to them. Both were in critical condition, and they were urgently taken to intensive care. At that time, Detective Kim Sung-hee came to visit Eugene. She said that their marketing department had agreed to help, and soon they would make instructions for promoting Eugene's magic school on social media. The girl thought this news would make the mage happy, but for some reason it did not. Eugene had looked frightening before, and now, when he was depressed, it became sickening to be in his presence. Unable to stand the atmosphere, Kim Sung-hee asked the mage what had happened to him. He explained that right now he felt ashamed in front of the girl, especially after she had met him halfway, yet now he was thinking of abandoning his plan and looking for himself in another pursuit. When the girl asked why, he explained that he had met a child who was hurting herself but still desperately clinging to her dream, and instead of supporting that child, Eugene had tried to make her give up, causing her pain. The mage felt deep gloom that he had barged in with moral lectures without truly understanding someone else's feelings, so he could hardly become a teacher. Sipping her drink through a straw, Kim Sung-hee thought for a moment. Eugene looked at her when the girl called him by name. In a calm voice, she explained that detectives also face similar situations, even more often than one might think. They kick in doors where robbers are, to save victims, and in response, they often hear the question of who will pay for the damage. With a smile on her face, the detective shared that once she saved a young man who was trembling on a bridge and about to jump, and he slapped her and asked why she had dragged him away. Sitting across from each other, Kim Sung-hee told the mage that the world was full of people who were clearly in danger, but they either did not realize it or stubbornly pretended everything was fine. With a crooked smile, the detective asked if that meant they should not intervene, because her job assumed the exact opposite. Pointing at the promotional flyers lying on the table, the girl reminded him that the mage himself had decided to become a mentor, to make that child understand she was in danger and help find a solution together. That was exactly the task of a teacher. After hearing the girl's words, Eugene thought that he would very much like that, but he simply did not see a way. But Kim Sung-hee's words that there was always a way in a world ruled by magic made Eugene perk up a little. She said that if he truly tried, he would definitely come up with something. Her encouragement made Eugene gather his resolve again. The area was practically destroyed where Friedrich and Ayn had been fighting. The mage did not hesitate to use any spells on the girl, not even taking her age into account. And although Ayn was taking a beating, she still kept holding on. Moreover, again and again she used multiple spells. A hail of mana projectiles rained down on Friedrich. Managing to distract the man with them, Ayn got behind his back. Using second-level magic, she attacked him from above. Again and again, the girl used various spells, such as high-frequency rebar, an energy storm, or telekinetic explosive bullets. She even brought down reinforced mana blades on the man, but all her spells shattered against his protective barrier. Even a magic sword could not scratch him. In response, Friedrich used a fire spell, hurling the girl far backward. Ayn was furious that nothing was working, but even then she did not stop casting. Friedrich felt something huge forming behind him. Turning back, he saw a massive slab of earth hanging over him with telekinesis. Then, like a giant snake, the slab of earth crashed down on him. When the earth swallowed Friedrich, Ayn was able to stop. She needed to catch her breath because her heart was racing out of control. Suddenly, the ground trembled again, and Friedrich's words were heard that the girl possessed many elements and spells, and wove them together so skillfully that she could even turn a mountain upside down. The earth exploded, and surrounded by fire, Friedrich was free again. Looking at the girl, he smirked that although she had thrown countless spells, not one of them had been able to scratch him. In a disappointed voice, he noted that he had not come here to watch a talent show, but suddenly he cut himself off. Right above his head, Ayn was creating a triple spell. The girl poured all her strength into casting it. Then she used the Spear of the Falling Star, directing it at Friedrich. After using that spell, the girl was completely out of strength. There was simply nothing stronger in her arsenal, and besides, she had spent every technique she could use. In fact, she had reached her limit. If she cast even one more spell, her magical heart would not withstand it and would simply explode. But even so, Friedrich stood before her completely unharmed. When he headed toward Ain, the girl understood that it was the end for her and her magic because she had lost the battle. Standing before her, the man did not touch her, but demanded that she cut it out. Towering over the girl, he declared that kids like her should be sitting at home. Those words stunned the girl, and when Friedrich heard about the Archmage's daughter, he became curious what she was made of. But all he saw were cheap, showy tricks, and that notorious 3-ring technique, which seemed like a complete farce to him. Looking at her with contempt, he said he almost felt sorry for Jung Ehyok, if that was his own standard. The words that killing a loser like her would be doing the Supreme Mage a favor badly shocked Ain. Friedrich scratched his chin and indifferently said that he would rather die than do anything that would make Jung Ehyok's life easier. Turning away from the girl, the man was about to leave, tossing over his shoulder that it only took one look at her assistance for everything to become clear, and it had only ruined his mood. Ain could not believe the man was just leaving, like that, without doing anything. She could not allow it to end this way, reminding the man that he had been going to bring her head to the Supreme Mage. Gathering the last of her strength, Ain began activating another spell, demanding that Friedrich come back and finish the fight. The man understood that if he left it like this, the girl would be left with nothing but a pitiful existence, but he truly did not want to do anything to her. An kept provoking him, and then Friedrich decided to grant her wish, saying that he had spared her, yet she kept begging for torment. He turned around, preparing to fire his magic at her, but suddenly he saw that something had appeared in front of the girl. That something was so horrible it chilled the mage to the bone, and Ain in turn was also greatly surprised, because standing before her was Eugene,